The storm howled through the mountains like a wounded beast, driving snow and ice across the Colorado landscape with merciless fury. February 1875 had brought the worst winter anyone could remember, with temperatures so low they froze breath into crystals before it could dissipate. Most living creatures had the good sense to find shelter, to hide away from nature's wrath. Most, but not Nathaniel Reed. His mare struggled against the wind, each step labored and hesitant. Nathaniel leaned forward in his saddle, one hand on the reins, the other clutching his coat tighter around his throat. He had been checking his hunting traps when the storm surged without warning, transforming a routine task into a desperate race against death. His cabin was still a mile away, and darkness was falling fast, stealing what little visibility the snowfall had spared. A flash of color caught his eye, something dark against the endless white. Nathaniel pulled the mare to a stop, squinting through the swirling snow. There, perhaps 50 yards ahead, something disrupted the pristine landscape. He clicked his tongue, urging the horse forward at a cautious pace. As they drew closer, the shape resolved itself into a form that made Nathaniel's heart pound against his ribs. A human figure lay crumpled against the base of a pine tree, partially covered by drifting snow. Nathaniel was off his horse in an instant, boots crunching through the snow as he approached with measured steps. His right hand hovered near the revolver at his hip, caution born from years of experience. The mountains held many dangers, and not all of them came from nature. It was a woman. Her dark hair was matted with snow and ice, her face obscured as she slumped against the tree trunk. Her clothing was an unusual mix, buckskin leggings in the style of the Ute people, but with a settler's woolen coat, now torn and bloodied. The snow beneath her right leg was stained crimson. Gunshot wound. The assessment came automatically as Nathaniel knelt beside her, his trained eye catching the telltale hole in her thigh. Not fresh, perhaps a day old, but still dangerous. More concerning was the blue tinge to her lips and the shallow rise and fall of her chest. Hypothermia had already taken hold. "Ma'am," he called softly, touching her shoulder with firm gentleness. "Can you hear me?" The woman's eyes snapped open, dark and wild with fear. She jerked away from his touch, a hoarse cry escaping her throat as she tried to scramble backward. The movement sent pain through her wounded leg, and she collapsed again with a whap-out. "I'm not going to hurt you," Nathaniel said, keeping his voice steady and even. He slowly raised his hands, palms forward. "You're injured and half frozen. You need help." Her eyes darted frantically between Nathaniel and the surrounding forest, as if weighing her chances of escape. Blood seeped through her leggings, leaving fresh stains on the snow. "They'll find me," she whispered, her voice so faint he barely caught it over the wind. Nathaniel frowned. "Who will?" Instead of answering, she pressed her lips together, eyes closing momentarily as a tremor ran through her body. When she looked at him again, her gaze was clearer, assessment replacing panic. She was studying him now, trying to determine what manner of threat he posed. "There's no time," he said firmly. "If you stay here, you'll be dead within the hour." He removed his heavy outer coat and held it toward her. "I can help. My cabin isn't far." She stared at the offered coat, then at his face, weighing some internal calculation. Another violent shiver racked her body, and Nathaniel saw the moment decision crystallized in her eyes. With a small, barely perceptible nod, she reached for the coat with trembling fingers. He carried her to the mare, who stood patiently in the storm, and carefully mounted with the woman cradled against his chest. "Hold on," he murmured, and felt her arms reluctantly encircle his waist as he urged the horse forward. The cabin stood as a dark silhouette against the white landscape, smoke still rising faintly from the chimney. Nathaniel dismounted carefully, the woman a dead weight in his arms as he carried her to the door. He shouldered it open, the warmth of the interior enveloping them like an embrace. The single-room cabin was sparse but meticulously organized. A cast-iron stove glowed orange in one corner, a narrow bed pushed against the far wall. Shelves lined with books, dried herbs, and medical supplies covered another. Everything had its place, the careful arrangement of a man who had spent too much time alone with his thoughts. Nathaniel laid the woman on his bed, then moved quickly to stoke the fire in the stove. Once satisfied with the blaze, he returned to her side, medical instincts taking over. He needed to assess her wounds, warm her core temperature, and stop any bleeding, tasks that required removing wet clothing. "I need to treat your leg," he said, his tone professional, and get you out of these wet clothes before frostbite sets in. Her eyes had opened again, watching him with wary intensity. When she didn't protest, Nathaniel moved efficiently, years of battlefield medicine guiding his actions. He removed her torn and frozen outer garments, preserving her dignity with a blanket whenever possible. The gunshot wound in her thigh was his primary concern, a clean shot that had passed through muscle, missing the bone and major arteries. As he worked, memories flickered unbidden in his mind. A field hospital during the war, young men bleeding out under his hands, the smell of gunpowder and death, the sound of his own voice, steady despite the chaos, ordering orderlies to bring more bandages, more water, more of what they didn't have, not now. Focus on the present, the woman hissed as he cleaned the wound with whiskey, her fingers clutching the edge of the blanket. Nathaniel murmured an apology without looking up, his hands never faltering. He applied a poultice of yarrow and plantain, herbs he'd gathered and dried himself, before wrapping the leg in clean bandages. By the time he'd finished, color had returned to her face, though she still trembled occasionally. Nathaniel placed another log in the stove, then prepared a cup of willow bark tea for the pain and fever. "Drink this," he said, helping her sit up enough to sip the bitter liquid. "It will help with the pain." She accepted the cup, her eyes never leaving his face. After taking a cautious taste, she drank deeply, suggesting she recognized the remedy. "How long have I been here?" she asked suddenly, her voice stronger than it had been in the forest. The clarity of her English surprised him, though he kept his expression neutral. "About an hour," Nathaniel replied, moving to hang her wet clothes near the stove to dry. "The storm's getting worse. We're not going anywhere for a while." She nodded slightly, studying the cabin's interior with the same careful assessment she'd given him earlier. Taking inventory, noting exits, looking for weapons, not the behavior of someone used to feeling safe. "I'm Riverhawk," she said after a long silence, "but most people call me Anna." Nathaniel paused in his work, turning to face her. The offering of her name was a small trust, one he wouldn't dismiss. "Nathaniel Reed," he responded simply. Anna nodded once, as if confirming something to herself. She finished the tea and handed him the empty cup, their fingers brushing momentarily. Her hand was warm now, the blue tinge gone from her skin. "Thank you," she said quietly, "for not leaving me in the snow." Nathaniel turned away, uncomfortable with gratitude. "Get some rest. That leg needs time to heal." As Anna settled back against the pillow, Nathaniel took a seat in the wooden chair beside the stove, positioned to face both the bed and the door. He retrieved his rifle from its place by the entrance, laying it across his lap as he prepared for a long night of watchfulness. Outside, the storm continued its assault, wind howling against the cabin walls like something seeking entrance. But inside, warmth gradually filled the space, along with the silence of two strangers bound by circumstance, each carrying their own storms within. Anna slept fitfully for 3 days, drifting in and out of consciousness as fever gripped her body. When awake, she accepted water and broth from Nathaniel's hands, her eyes tracking his movements with diminishing suspicion. When asleep, she murmured in a language Nathaniel recognized as Ute, sometimes calling out with such anguish that it pierced the careful barriers he'd built around himself. On the fourth morning, Nathaniel was grinding herbs with a mortar and pestle when he sensed a change in the room. He looked up to find Anna fully awake, her dark eyes clear for the first time since he'd found her. "The fever's broken," he observed, setting aside his work. Anna nodded, adjusting herself to sit up against the headboard. "Your poultice helped, though you used too much yarrow and not enough golden seal." Nathaniel's eyebrows rose slightly at the critique. "You know herbs?" "My mother was a healer among the Ute," she replied, her gaze moving to the collection of dried plants hanging from the cabin's rafters. "And my father was a doctor, Spanish." Nathaniel absorbed this information without comment, though it explained her fluent English and knowledge of medicine. Mixed heritage was uncommon, but not unheard of in these territories. "The wound is healing well," he said, changing the subject, "but you shouldn't put weight on that leg for another week at least." Anna's jaw tightened, a flash of frustration crossing her features before she controlled it. "I don't have a week. Those men hunting you will have to wait," Nathaniel said flatly, returning to his herbs. Anna stiffened. "I never said—" "You didn't have to." Nathaniel looked up at her again, his expression neutral. "Gunshot wound, exposure. They'll find me. Doesn't take a genius to understand you're running from something or someone. A heavy silence fell between them. Outside, the storm had finally passed, leaving behind a pristine world of white. Sunlight streamed through the cabin's single window, casting long shadows across the wooden floor. How many? Nathaniel asked eventually. Anna studied him for a long moment before answering. 4 men, led by Harlan Morgan. Nathaniel knew the name. Most people in Colorado Territory did. Morgan owned the largest coal mining operation in the region, employing hundreds and wielding influence that extended from local government to territorial legislature. A man of wealth, power, and reportedly ruthless business practices. That's a powerful enemy for one woman, Nathaniel observed. Anna's eyes hardened. I didn't choose him as an enemy. He chose to become one when he killed my father. There was such conviction in her voice that Nathaniel didn't doubt her for a second. He'd seen enough of the world to know that wealth often served as a shield for men's darkest actions. I should check your bandages, he said, moving toward the bed with a fresh poultice. Anna allowed him to examine the wound, watching his hands with professional interest. You were a doctor, she stated, not a question. Army surgeon during the war. Nathaniel worked methodically, cleaning the wound before applying fresh herbs. Which side? Does it matter? Anna shrugged slightly. Not to me. War is just men dying for other men's causes. Nathaniel's hands stilled for a moment, struck by the simple truth of her words. How many young men had he tried to piece back together, only to send them out to be broken again? How many had he failed to save? The image of a young private flooded his mind. Barely 18, gut shot, crying for his mother as Nathaniel worked frantically to stem the bleeding. The memory was so vivid he could almost smell the metallic tang of blood, hear the chaos of the field hospital around him. Doctor? Anna's voice pulled him back to the present. She was watching him closely, understanding in her eyes. You're far away. Nathaniel cleared his throat, finishing the bandage with practiced efficiency. Happens sometimes, he said gruffly. My people call it ghost sickness, Anna said quietly. When warriors return with spirits clinging to them, memories that won't let go. Nathaniel moved away, uncomfortable with her perception. He gathered the used bandages and disposed of them in the stove, keeping his back to her. You should rest more, he said, changing the subject. I need to check my traps. When he returned to the cabin, arms laden with firewood, he found Anna examining his collection of medical supplies. She had managed to move to the edge of the bed, her injured legs stretched out before her. In her hands was a worn leather medical bag, its contents spread across the blanket. You have laudanum, but no morphine, she observed without looking up, and your surgical instruments need sharpening. Nathaniel set down the firewood with more force than necessary. Those aren't for guests to rummage through. Anna looked up at him, unrepentant. If I'm going to be stuck here, I might as well make myself useful. I can prepare better poultices with what you have. Nathaniel wanted to be angry at the invasion of privacy, but the practical part of him recognized the value in her knowledge. Still, boundaries needed to be established. Next time, ask, he said firmly, removing his coat and hanging it by the door. Anna gathered the medical supplies back into the bag, wincing slightly as she moved. I will, though your organizational system leaves much to be desired. Despite himself, Nathaniel felt a smile threatening. Her forthright manner was oddly refreshing after so much solitude. He busied himself with stoking the fire, aware of her gaze on his back. Your belongings are there, he said, nodding toward a small pack near the door. I recovered what I could from where I found you. Anna's expression changed, alert and focused, as she looked at the pack. All of it. Nathaniel nodded, noticing the intensity of her reaction. Everything that was on you. Not much. Some food, a water skin, a knife. Relief flickered across her face, quickly masked. She gestured toward the pack. Would you mind? Nathaniel brought it to her, watching as she quickly searched through the contents. Her movements became more frantic until she pulled out a small, leather-bound journal, clutching it to her chest with palpable relief. Thank you, she whispered. And this time her gratitude seemed to reach somewhere deeper. Nathaniel's curiosity was piqued, but he respected her privacy enough not to ask. Whatever that book contained, it clearly held immense value to her. As evening approached, Nathaniel prepared a simple stew of dried venison and preserved vegetables. When the stew was ready, he brought a bowl to Anna, who had returned to sitting on the bed, the journal now hidden somewhere among her possessions. She accepted the food with a nod of thanks, inhaling the steam with appreciation. "It's been a long time since I've had a hot meal," she admitted, taking a careful spoonful. Nathaniel sat in his chair, his own bowl balanced on his knee. "How long have you been running?" Anna considered him over the rim of her bowl. 6 days, though it feels like a lifetime. "From where?" "A small settlement near Morgan's main mining operation. Coalfield." Nathaniel knew of it, little more than a company town where Morgan's word was practically law. "Long way to travel with a bullet in your leg." "I didn't start with one," Anna said dryly. "That came on day 3, courtesy of Morgan's men." They ate in silence for a while, the only sounds the clink of spoons against bowls and the occasional pop of wood in the stove. Nathaniel found himself studying Anna when she wasn't looking. The strong line of her jaw, the intricate braid that kept her dark hair from her face, the calluses on her hands that spoke of a life of work. "Why is Morgan hunting you?" he finally asked, setting aside his empty bowl. Anna's expression closed, her eyes dropping to the remaining stew in her bowl. "That's complicated. Most things worth hunting usually are." Her gaze lifted to his, measuring and assessing once more. Nathaniel waited, letting her come to her own decision about how much to trust him. "What do you know about the mines?" she asked eventually. "I know they're dangerous. Men die." Nathaniel shrugged. "That's the nature of mining." Anna set her bowl aside, her expression darkening. "What if I told you men are dying far more often than they should, from something other than accidents?" Nathaniel frowned. "What do you mean?" "There's a sickness in the mines. The men call it black lung, but it's more than that. It's killing them by the dozens, and Morgan is covering it up." Her voice had taken on an edge of contained fury. "My father discovered what was happening. He was developing a treatment when Morgan had him killed." Nathaniel absorbed this, his expression neutral. "That's a serious accusation." "It's the truth." Anna's hand moved unconsciously toward where she'd hidden the journal. "And I have proof." Understanding dawned on Nathaniel. "The book." Anna nodded once, her jaw set with determination. "My father's research, his formula for a treatment, and documentation of exactly what Morgan has been hiding. How many men have died, how he's falsified death certificates, bribed officials. And you're planning to take this to who?" "There's a journalist in Denver, someone who can't be bought or threatened. He's expecting me." Anna's expression faltered briefly. "Or he was, before I was delayed." Nathaniel stood, taking both their empty bowls to the small basin of water he kept for washing. His back to Anna, he considered the implications of what she'd shared. If true, her story revealed a level of corruption and disregard for human life that was disturbing but not entirely surprising. He'd seen enough of the world to know what men like Morgan were capable of when profit was at stake. But it also meant that the woman in his cabin was carrying something far more dangerous than he'd initially realized. Something men would kill for, had already tried to kill for. "You should leave as soon as your leg heals," he said finally, turning back to face her. "The pass to Denver will be clear in a week if the weather holds." Anna studied him, disappointment evident in her eyes. "You don't believe me." "Whether I believe you or not doesn't matter," Nathaniel replied evenly. "I'm just a man in a cabin who wants to be left alone. Whatever crusade you're on, it's not mine to fight." "It's everyone's fight when innocent people are dying," Anna said, her voice quiet but intense. "Even yours, Doctor, whether you want to admit it or not." The title struck him like a physical blow, Doctor. He hadn't been that man for a long time, had deliberately left that identity behind, along with the war, the deaths, the failures. Yet here was this woman pulling it back to the surface with unerring precision. "Get some rest," Nathaniel said gruffly, turning away from her penetrating gaze. "Your body needs to heal." He moved to his chair, stretching out his legs toward the stove. It wasn't comfortable, but he'd slept in worse conditions. Anna watched him for a moment longer before settling back against the pillows. "Where will you sleep?" she asked. "I'll manage." Anna frowned slightly. "This is your bed. I can—" "You can stay where you are," Nathaniel interrupted. "Wounded patients don't sleep on floors." A moment of silence stretched between them. Then softly, "Thank you, Nathaniel." He nodded once, not looking at her, and reached to turn down the lamp. Darkness enveloped the cabin, broken only by the orange glow of the stove. Outside, the night was crystal clear after the storm, stars burning cold and distant in the mountain sky. Nathaniel closed his eyes but didn't sleep. His mind was too full of what Anna had told him, of Morgan and mines and men dying from poisoned lungs. And beneath those thoughts, a deeper current, the uncomfortable realization that after years of chosen isolation, he now had someone under his roof who needed protection. Someone who, despite his better judgment, he was already starting to care about. The journal lay open on the table between them, its pages covered in a cramped, precise handwriting, interspersed with detailed diagrams of lungs, herbs, and chemical formulas. Some sections were written in what appeared to be a complex cipher, the letters arranged in patterns that made no sense to Nathaniel's untrained eye. "This is what Morgan wants," Anna said, her finger tracing the edge of a particularly dense page of notes. "My father's complete formula for treating black lung disease." It was morning, a week after Nathaniel had found Anna in the snow. Her fever had not returned, and the wound in her leg was healing cleanly. She moved around the cabin with the help of a crutch Nathaniel had fashioned from a sturdy branch, her strength returning day by day. "And you can read this?" Nathaniel asked, studying a section of cipher. Anna nodded. "My father taught me his code when I was a child. We used it as a game at first, passing secret messages. Later, when his work became more sensitive, it became necessary." Nathaniel turned a page, finding a detailed drawing of a plant he recognized. "Blue cohosh, not common around here." "No, but essential to the treatment." Anna tapped another page with similar illustrations. "Combined with these other herbs and certain minerals, it creates a compound that can help clear the lungs and reduce inflammation." "And your father tested this?" "It works." Anna's expression darkened. It was working. The miners he treated secretly were showing improvement. That's why Morgan had him killed. The treatment threatened to expose what was happening in the mines. Nathaniel sat back in his chair, absorbing the implications. If what Anna said was true, Morgan wasn't just covering up unsafe conditions. He was actively silencing those who might reveal them, protecting his profits at the cost of human lives. "Why didn't your father take this to the authorities?" he asked. Anna gave him a look that questioned his naivety. "Morgan owns the local sheriff, the territory officials. Even the doctor in Coalfield is on his payroll, signing death certificates that list consumption or natural causes instead of what's really killing these men." She closed the journal, her hand lingering protectively on its cover. "My father tried working within the system. He appealed to Morgan indirectly, thinking he might not know the extent of the problem. But Morgan knew. He just didn't care." Nathaniel understood then why this mission meant so much to Anna. It wasn't just about justice or exposing corruption. It was about finishing what her father had started, about making his death mean something. "You mentioned it a journalist in Denver," Nathaniel said. "How can you be sure he's not in Morgan's pocket too?" "Samuel Fletcher. He's known for exposing corruption in the mining industry. He's written pieces that have led to actual reforms." Anna's voice held a note of hope. "And he was my father's friend. They corresponded for years." Nathaniel nodded slowly, considering their options. The pass to Denver would be treacherous but navigable with proper preparation. Anna's leg needed more time to heal, but they couldn't wait too long. If Morgan's men were searching the area. "We need supplies," he said finally. "I'll have to go into town." Anna looked up sharply. "Pinecrest? Morgan will have men watching." "Probably, but we need medicine, food, ammunition." Nathaniel stood, moving to check his revolver. "And there's someone there who might help us. A pharmacist named Solomon. I've traded with him before." "Can he be trusted?" Anna's question held the wariness of someone who'd learned the hard way about misplaced trust. "As much as anyone can be these days," Nathaniel replied honestly. "He has no love for Morgan. The mining company tried to force him out of business last year to make way for their company store." Anna considered this, then reached into her pack and removed a sealed envelope. "Give him this. If he really can be trusted, he'll know what it means." Nathaniel took the envelope, noting the name written in the same precise handwriting as the journal. "Isaac Solomon. Your father knew him?" "They studied together in Boston, many years ago." A small smile touched Anna's lips. Before my father scandalized society by marrying a Ute woman and moving west. Nathaniel tucked the envelope inside his coat. I'll leave at first light tomorrow. Should be back by nightfall if the weather holds. Anna nodded, her expression serious. Be careful. Morgan's men won't hesitate to shoot a stranger who asks too many questions. I'm not planning on asking questions, Nathaniel said. Just getting supplies and information. Nothing suspicious about that. Everything is suspicious to men with something to hide, Anna countered. Nathaniel couldn't argue with that. He'd seen enough of the darker side of human nature to know she was right. I'll be careful, he promised, his tone softening slightly. They spent the remainder of the day preparing. Nathaniel made a list of necessary supplies while Anna mixed herbal remedies from his existing stock, improving his poultices with her knowledge of traditional Ute medicine. There was an easy rhythm to their work, a comfortable silence that required no filling. In the quiet darkness, with Anna's steady breathing beside him, Nathaniel felt an unexpected peace settle over him. The cabin had been his sanctuary for years, a place to hide from the world and its pain. Yet now, with Anna's presence, it had transformed into something else entirely. Not a refuge from life, but a place where life might begin again. As sleep claimed him, his thoughts drifted to the journey ahead. Not just the physical path to Denver, but the harder road back to the world of the living. A journey he'd never expected to take again. Dawn broke over the mountains in a wash of pale gold, turning the snow-covered landscape into a sea of glittering diamonds. Nathaniel stood on the cabin porch, the morning air sharp in his lungs as he checked his saddlebags one final time. His breath formed clouds in the frigid air, dissipating slowly in the stillness. Behind him, the cabin door opened. Anna stood in the threshold, leaning on the crutch he had fashioned for her, a woolen blanket draped over her shoulders. She had insisted on seeing him off, despite his suggestion that she conserve her strength. Remember, she said, her voice low and urgent, if you're not back by nightfall, I'll assume the worst. Nathaniel nodded, tightening the cinch on his saddle. And you remember to stay inside, use the rifle if necessary. I know how to use a gun, Doctor. There was a hint of amusement in her voice. I wasn't always a patient. He turned to face her, struck by how much stronger she looked compared to the half-frozen woman he'd found in the snow. Color had returned to her cheeks, and her dark eyes were clear and alert. The borrowed clothes, his own, altered to fit her smaller frame, gave her an oddly domestic appearance, at odds with the fierce determination in her expression. Solomon first, Anna reminded him. Then supplies. Don't linger. You're giving a lot of orders for someone who can barely stand, Nathaniel observed dryly. Anna's lips curved in a small smile. Someone has to keep you from doing something foolish. The easy banter between them was new, a development of the past few days as Anna's health had improved and the initial wariness between them had softened into something closer to trust. Nathaniel found himself reluctant to leave, despite the urgency of their need for supplies. I'll be back before dark, he promised, mounting his horse with practiced ease. Keep the door barred. Anna nodded, her expression growing serious again. Be careful, Nathaniel. He tipped his hat in acknowledgement, then turned his mare toward the trail that led down from the mountain. He didn't look back, but he could feel Anna's eyes on him until the path curved and the cabin disappeared from view. The ride to Pinecrest took longer than usual. Nathaniel deliberately chose a circuitous route, avoiding the main trail where Morgan's men might be watching. He stayed within the tree line whenever possible, his senses alert for any sign of other riders. By mid-morning, the frontier town came into view, a scattered collection of wooden buildings nestled in a narrow valley. Smoke rose from chimneys against the clear blue sky, and a few people moved along the muddy main street, their figures small and distant. Nathaniel paused at the edge of the forest, studying the town for several long minutes. Nothing seemed out of the ordinary, but that didn't mean danger wasn't present. Morgan's influence cast a long shadow, and after what Anna had told him, Nathaniel knew to expect eyes in unexpected places. He urged his horse forward at a walk, adopting the casual posture of a man with no particular urgency or concern. The key to not attracting attention was to appear as though you had nothing to hide. Pinecrest looked exactly as it had the last time he'd visited. A single dusty street lined with wooden buildings, most in various states of disrepair. Only the saloon and the general store showed signs of prosperity, their painted facades standing out among the weathered structures. At the far end of the street, a small church with a crooked steeple completed the scene. Nathaniel rode slowly into town, his posture relaxed but his senses alert. The late morning sun cast sharp shadows across the street, where a few townspeople went about their business with the unhurried pace of frontier life. A couple of horses stood hitched outside the saloon, stamping occasionally against the cold. Nothing appeared immediately threatening, but Nathaniel noticed the subtle shift in atmosphere as he passed, conversations pausing, eyes tracking his movement. Strangers were always objects of curiosity in small towns, but there was something more here. A wariness that made the hair on the back of his neck stand up. He dismounted outside Solomon's pharmacy, tying his horse to the hitching post before adjusting his coat to ensure his revolver remained accessible. The list of supplies Anna had helped him prepare was tucked in his pocket, ordinary items that wouldn't raise suspicion. The pharmacy was a narrow building with a large front window displaying colored glass bottles. A bell jingled as Nathaniel entered, announcing his presence to the thin, elderly man arranging items on a shelf behind the counter. Isaac Solomon turned at the sound, revealing a face lined with age and intelligence. His white beard was neatly trimmed, his clothes simple but immaculate. He studied Nathaniel through wire-rimmed spectacles, his gaze sharp and assessing. "Good morning," he said, his voice carrying the faint trace of an accent. "How can I help you?" Nathaniel approached the counter, keeping his voice low. "I need something for pain." "And information." Solomon's expression didn't change, but his eyes flickered briefly to the window, where two rough-looking men could be seen lounging across the street. "For yourself?" he asked, loud enough to be heard by anyone who might be listening at the door. "Yes," Nathaniel replied at the same volume before leaning closer and adding quietly, "I have something for you. From a friend." Solomon's eyes narrowed fractionally. He gestured for Nathaniel to follow him toward the back of the shop, where rows of drawers and shelves created a semblance of privacy. "What friend would that be?" Solomon asked cautiously, once they were partially concealed from the street view. Nathaniel reached into his coat and withdrew Anna's envelope, keeping it hidden from sight as he passed it to the pharmacist. "Ana Cortez, daughter of Miguel." Solomon's composed demeanor cracked at the name, his hands trembling slightly as he accepted the envelope. "Miguel's daughter? She's alive?" "She's safe," Nathaniel confirmed. "For now." Solomon quickly broke the seal and scanned the letter inside, his expression growing more troubled with each line. When he finished, he carefully folded the paper and tucked it into his vest pocket. "So it's true then," he said quietly, almost to himself. "All of it." "The disease? Morgan's involvement?" Nathaniel pressed. Solomon nodded grimly. "Black lung is common enough in coal miners, but this is something worse. Something that kills faster, more brutally." He glanced toward the front of the store, ensuring they were still alone. "I've treated men in secret, miners who come at night, terrified of losing their jobs if Morgan finds out they're sick. 40 dead that I know of, probably more. And Morgan is covering it up? Completely. Death certificates forged, families paid off or threatened into silence. The company doctor is his puppet." Solomon's voice held controlled fury. "I tried to help Miguel investigate. That's why they targeted my business last year. Tried to drive me out." Nathaniel processed this information, which confirmed everything Anna had told him. "We need your help. Anna has her father's research, a treatment that works. But we need to get it to Denver, to a journalist who can expose Morgan." Solomon moved to a cabinet, unlocking it with the key from his pocket. "What do you need?" "Medicine for her leg, supplies for the journey, and information. How many men does Morgan have watching the roads? Is there a safe route to Denver?" The pharmacist gathered various bottles and packages as Nathaniel spoke, wrapping them carefully in paper. "Morgan has men everywhere, at least 6 in town right now, including those 2 watching you. The main road to Denver is certainly being watched." He handed the package to Nathaniel. "There's a trail through the high country, dangerous this time of year, but passable with care. It adds 3 days to the journey but avoids Morgan's patrols." He quickly sketched a rough map on a piece of paper and included it with the medicines. "The blue bottle is laudanum for pain. The brown powder is an antibiotic compound. Mix with water for her wound." Nathaniel tucked everything into his coat. "Thank you." Solomon gripped his arm suddenly, his eyes intense behind the spectacles. Miguel was my friend for 40 years. His daughter carries work that could save hundreds of lives. His voice dropped even lower. Be careful. Morgan is more dangerous than you know. I understand. Solomon released him, composing himself once more. In a louder voice, he said, take 1 teaspoon of the tonic morning and night for your rheumatism. That will be 75 cents. Nathaniel paid, maintaining the pretense for any watching eyes. As he turned to leave, Solomon added quietly, there's something else you should know. Sheriff Cooper lost his brother to the lung sickness last month. He might help you if approached carefully. One more thing, Cooper added, lowering his voice further. Reardon's been acting strange lately, missing meetings with Morgan, taking time off. Word is his son works the north shaft at the Blackwater mine, hasn't been seen in weeks. Some say the boy's got the sickness bad. Could be why Reardon's been so desperate to find that journal. More than just following Morgan's orders. This unexpected information gave Nathaniel pause. A sheriff who might be sympathetic could be a valuable ally, or a dangerous complication if Morgan had him under surveillance. I'll keep that in mind, he replied, before heading back to the front of the store. Outside, the two men still loitered across the street, making no effort to disguise their observation. Nathaniel ignored them, securing his purchases to his saddle with deliberate calm. His next move needed to be natural, nothing that would arouse further suspicion. The general store seemed the logical choice, a traveler restocking before heading back into the mountains. He led his horse down the street, feeling the watcher's eyes on his back. Inside, he purchased the items on his list with minimal conversation, keeping his manner unremarkable despite the heightened awareness coursing through him. As he stepped back onto the street, a new figure caught his attention, a man in a worn leather vest with a sheriff's star pinned to it. Sheriff Cooper stood outside the saloon, watching the street with deceptively casual interest. He was perhaps 50, with graying hair and a weathered face that spoke of years in the elements. Nathaniel considered Solomon's information. If Cooper had lost his brother to the mine sickness, he might indeed be sympathetic to Anna's cause. But approaching him directly was too risky with Morgan's men watching. As Nathaniel deliberated, the sheriff's gaze met his briefly, an unreadable expression passing across the older man's face. Then, almost imperceptibly, Cooper nodded toward the alley beside the saloon before turning and walking in that direction. A clear invitation, or possibly a trap. Nathaniel weighed his options quickly. Every instinct urged caution, but Solomon had suggested Cooper might be an ally, and they needed all the help they could get. After a moment's hesitation, Nathaniel secured his purchases and led his horse toward the alley, his right hand casually close to his revolver. The narrow passage between the saloon and the adjacent building was dim and smelled of stale beer and urine. Cooper stood halfway down, leaning against the weathered boards of the saloon as though taking a moment's rest. When Nathaniel approached, the sheriff spoke without looking at him. You're not from around here. Just passing through, Nathaniel replied neutrally. Cooper finally turned to face him, his eyes hard and evaluating. Funny time of year to be passing through. Roads are barely passable. I live up in the high country. Come down for supplies when needed. Uh-huh. Cooper's gaze flicked to the street, then back to Nathaniel. And your visit to Solomon has nothing to do with a certain half-Ute woman Morgan's been hunting? Nathaniel's expression remained impassive, though his muscles tensed. I don't know what you're talking about. Cooper gave a short, humorless laugh. Save it. I saw you pass him something. I've been watching Solomon for weeks. He was Miguel Cortez's friend. And what's your interest in Dr. Cortez? Nathaniel asked, his hand now resting openly on his revolver. Something shifted in Cooper's weathered face, a flash of pain quickly masked. My brother Thomas was one of the first miners to get sick. Miguel treated him in secret. Didn't charge a penny. He looked away, his jaw working. Didn't save him in the end, but he tried. More than Morgan's pet doctor ever did. Nathaniel studied the sheriff, looking for any sign of deception. That doesn't explain why you're approaching me. Because I know what you're carrying, Cooper's voice dropped lower. Or rather, who you're helping. The Cortez girl is alive, isn't she? When Nathaniel didn't answer, Cooper continued, Morgan's offering $1,000 for her and her father's book. Every bounty hunter and desperate fool in the territory will be looking. Why are you telling me this? Cooper met his gaze directly. Because Miguel Cortez was a good man who didn't deserve what happened to him. And because 43 miners have died of that lung sickness in the past year, including my brother. He spat into the dirt. Morgan's getting away with murder, and nobody's doing a damn thing about it. Nathaniel considered his next words carefully. If Cooper was sincere, he could be a valuable ally. If he was setting a trap, revealing too much could be fatal, not just for Nathaniel, but for Anna. If someone wanted to get to Denver without using the main roads, he said finally, what route would you recommend? Cooper seemed to accept this cautious engagement. The high trail past Willow Creek. Dangerous this time of year, but Morgan's men don't patrol it. Too difficult. He reached into his vest and pulled out a folded piece of paper. Map, more detailed than anything Solomon could draw you. Nathaniel accepted the map but didn't examine it. Why help us? I told you, my brother. Cooper's face hardened. And because I've spent 30 years with this badge, trying to stand for something. Not much left of that now, with Morgan running everything. He glanced toward the street again. One last thing. Morgan's right-hand man, Callum Reardon, is in town. Mean son of a bitch. He's the one who pulled the trigger on Cortez. Nathaniel tucked the map inside his coat. I appreciate the warning. Cooper nodded once. Get moving. Those two across the street are Reardon's men. They've been watching Solomon's place since you arrived. With nothing more to say, Cooper straightened and walked back toward the street, resuming his role as the town sheriff with practiced ease. Nathaniel waited a few moments before following, his mind processing this unexpected turn of events. As he emerged from the alley, he immediately spotted a well-dressed man entering the saloon. Expensive wool coat, polished boots, the confident bearing of someone accustomed to authority. Even without Cooper's warning, Nathaniel would have marked him as dangerous. Callum Reardon, the man who had killed Miguel Cortez. Nathaniel untied his horse and mounted smoothly, fighting the urge to look over his shoulder as he turned toward the edge of town. The weight of watching eyes pressed against his back, but he maintained an unhurried pace, as though unaware of the scrutiny. Once clear of the town's outskirts, he nudged his mare into a faster trot, taking the main road north, the opposite direction from his cabin. Only when he was certain he wasn't being followed did he cut into the forest, circling back through dense woods toward the mountain trail that would lead him home. The journey back took twice as long as the ride in, with Nathaniel stopping frequently to check for pursuit. The sun was already low in the western sky when he finally approached the cabin, casting long shadows across the snowy clearing. As he dismounted, the cabin door opened. Anna stood in the doorway, the rifle cradled in her arms, relief evident in her face when she recognized him. You're late, she said, lowering the weapon. Had to take precautions. Nathaniel led his horse to the small stable attached to the cabin's rear. We were right to be concerned. Morgan's men are watching the town. Anna followed him, her movement still hampered by her injured leg but significantly improved from a week ago. Did you find Solomon? Yes, and more than we expected. Nathaniel removed the saddlebags and handed them to Anna. Let's get inside. There's much to discuss. The maps lay spread across the table, weighted at the corners by Nathaniel's hunting knife and medical instruments. 2 routes to Denver were marked, the main road, direct but exposed, and the high mountain trail Cooper had recommended, longer but offering better cover. Solomon confirmed everything you told me, Nathaniel said, unpacking the medicines the pharmacist had provided. 40 miners dead that he knows of, probably more. Anna studied the maps, her finger tracing the winding line of the mountain trail. And this Sheriff Cooper? You trust him? Nathaniel considered the question. His brother died from the lung sickness. Miguel treated him. He arranged the bottles of medicine in order of importance. He seemed genuine in his anger toward Morgan. Seemed, Anna repeated skeptically. Many things seem genuine until they aren't. Her caution was understandable. After what she'd endured, trust wouldn't come easily. Nathaniel handed her the blue bottle of laudanum. For the pain during the journey, he explained. The brown powder is for your wound, an antibiotic compound. Anna examined both with a practiced eye before setting them aside. When do we leave? 2 days, Nathaniel decided. You need to be stronger, and we need to prepare properly. The high trail will be challenging, especially with your injury. Anna frowned but didn't argue. She knew as well as he did that rushing unprepared into the mountains would be foolish. Instead, she turned her attention back to the maps, memorizing the route. Solomon mentioned something else, Nathaniel said, watching her closely. A man named Callum Reardon, Morgan's right-hand man. Anna's head snapped up, her eyes suddenly bright with an emotion Nathaniel couldn't immediately identify. Reardon was in town? Yes, Cooper pointed him out. Nathaniel hesitated, then added, he said Reardon was the one who killed your father. Anna's expression didn't change, but her hands stilled on the map. After a long moment she spoke, her voice controlled and distant. Yes, he pulled the trigger, but the order came from Morgan. She stood abruptly, moving to the window despite her limp, her back to Nathaniel. The rigid line of her shoulders spoke of tightly contained emotion. You saw him? She asked, still facing away. Briefly, he was entering the saloon as I was leaving town. Anna nodded once, a sharp jerking motion. What did he look like? Nathaniel described Reardon, tall, well-dressed, with the cold eyes of a predator and the smooth confidence of a man accustomed to getting his way. As he spoke, he watched Anna's reflection in the window glass, noting how her jaw clenched and her eyes narrowed. He came to our home in the night, she said suddenly, her voice low and flat. My father knew they were coming. He had warned me days before that Morgan might resort to violence if the treatment was successful. Her reflection stared unseeing at the darkening forest outside. He gave me the journal and told me to hide in the root cellar, said whatever happened, I had to get the research to Samuel Fletcher in Denver. Nathaniel remained silent, recognizing that Anna needed to tell this story in her own way. I heard them break in, heard my father refusing to tell them where the journal was. Her voice remained eerily controlled. Reardon shot him twice. I could see through the floorboards. Then they set fire to the house, probably hoping to destroy any research that remained. She turned from the window finally, her eyes meeting Nathaniel's with a hard, glittering intensity. I stayed hidden until they left. By then the fire was spreading. I couldn't even bury him. The last words came out as barely more than a whisper. Nathaniel felt an unexpected surge of anger on her behalf. He had seen death in many forms, the quick violence of the battlefield, the slow cruelty of disease, but the deliberate murder of a man trying to help others struck him as particularly abhorrent. I'm sorry, he said, knowing the words were inadequate. Anna acknowledged them with a slight nod, then returned to the table, her movements deliberate, as if holding herself together through sheer force of will. We should rest, Nathaniel suggested gently. Tomorrow we'll prepare for the journey. Anna nodded again, but her mind seemed elsewhere, perhaps still in that burning house, watching her father die. Nathaniel wished he knew how to ease that burden, but some wounds were beyond his ability to heal. As night settled over the cabin, they worked in companionable silence. Nathaniel cleaning his rifle and revolver, Anna organizing the supplies they would need for the journey. The routine tasks seemed to calm her, bringing her focus back to the present and away from painful memories. Later, as they shared a simple meal of beans and venison, Anna broke the silence. Tell me about your wife, she said unexpectedly. Nathaniel looked up, startled by the request. Sarah? Anna nodded, watching him with genuine interest. You mentioned her briefly before. You said she was a nurse during the war. The question caught him off guard. He rarely spoke of Sarah. The memories were still too painful, even after all these years. But something about Anna's direct gaze, and perhaps the trust she had shown in sharing her own painful story, made him willing to answer. She was, he began, then paused, searching for the right words. Strong, compassionate, stubborn as hell when she believed in something. A faint smile touched his lips at the memory. We met at a field hospital near Shiloh. I was the new surgeon, arrogant as they come. She put me in my place within 10 minutes of my arrival. Anna smiled slightly. I can imagine. She had this way with patients, Nathaniel continued, the memories flowing more easily now. Could calm even the most terrified young soldier. Made them believe they would survive, even when the odds were against them. He stared into his coffee, seeing Sarah's face instead of the dark liquid. After the war, we planned to head west, open a clinic somewhere it was needed, somewhere quiet. What happened? Anna asked softly. Nathaniel's expression darkened. Cholera, in a settlement where we'd stopped on our journey. Sarah insisted on helping care for the sick. His voice grew rougher. I told her it was too dangerous, but she said we'd taken an oath to heal whenever we could. The irony wasn't lost on him. how he'd abandoned that same oath after losing her. She died in my arms, he continued after a moment, along with half the settlement. Nothing I could do to save any of them. The admission still burned years later. After that, I kept moving west until I found this place, somewhere I couldn't hurt anyone else with my failure. Anna's expression held no pity, only understanding. That wasn't failure, Nathaniel. That was loss. There's a difference. Not when you're a doctor who can't save the person who matters most, he replied, more bitterness in his tone than he'd intended. Anna studied him for a long moment before speaking again. My mother had a saying, when someone we love dies, they leave a hole in the world that nothing can fill. But we honor them not by staring into that hole, but by continuing the work they believed in. The simple wisdom of her words struck Nathaniel deeply. How long had he been staring into the hole Sarah's death had left? How completely had he abandoned the work they'd both believed in? Your mother sounds wise, he said finally. She was. Anna smiled faintly. Like your Sarah, she died trying to help others, during a fever that swept through our village. The white doctor refused to treat Indians, so she used traditional medicines, saved many, but not herself. This shared experience of loss created a new understanding between them. Nathaniel felt something shift, a barrier within himself yielding slightly. Anna winced suddenly, her hand moving to her injured leg. The conversation had distracted her from the pain, but it clearly hadn't disappeared. Let me check your wound, Nathaniel said, his doctor's instincts surfacing. We should try Solomon's medicine before we leave. Anna nodded, extending her leg as Nathaniel knelt beside her chair. He unwrapped the bandage carefully, revealing the healing bullet wound. The inflammation had reduced significantly, and there was no sign of infection. A testament to both Anna's resilient constitution and the effectiveness of their combined medical knowledge. Nathaniel mixed the brown powder with water as Solomon had instructed, creating a paste that he applied gently to the wound. Anna watched him work, her gaze thoughtful. You're still a good doctor, she observed, despite what you believe. Nathaniel didn't respond, focusing on rebandaging the leg with clean cloth. He wasn't ready to reclaim that identity. Not yet, perhaps not ever. But something in Anna's words resonated with a part of himself he'd thought long dead. When he finished, their eyes met, and for a moment something unspoken passed between them. A recognition of shared pain, shared purpose, and perhaps something more. Anna's hand covered his briefly, a simple touch that conveyed gratitude and understanding more effectively than words. Nathaniel pulled away first, uncomfortable with the sudden intimacy. You should sleep, he said, rising to his feet. Tomorrow will be a full day of preparation. Anna nodded, recognizing his retreat for what it was. Thank you for the medicine and for sharing about Sarah. Nathaniel acknowledged her words with a slight nod before moving to bank the fire for the night. Outside, an owl called in the darkness, its mournful sound carrying across the silent forest. Within the cabin, two lonely souls had found an unexpected connection, a fragile bridge across the chasms of their separate griefs. The next 2 days passed in a flurry of preparation. They packed only essentials, food, medicines, ammunition, spare clothing, knowing that every extra pound would slow them on the difficult mountain trail. Nathaniel serviced his weapons meticulously, cleaning each component of his rifle and revolver until they gleamed in the lamplight. Anna studied the maps until she could recite each turn and landmark from memory. On the morning of their departure, Nathaniel rose before dawn. The cabin was cold, the fire having burned low during the night. He stoked it quickly, filling the kettle for coffee. Outside, the sky was still dark, stars fading as the first hint of dawn crept over the eastern mountains. He moved quietly, not wanting to wake Anna yet. She needed every bit of rest before the journey ahead. As he prepared a simple breakfast, he found himself glancing frequently at her sleeping form. Even in sleep, she maintained a certain tension, as though never fully surrendering to vulnerability. In the week and a half since he'd found her in the snow, Anna had transformed from a near stranger to, what? Not quite a friend, not exactly a patient anymore. Something undefined that made Nathaniel increasingly aware of her presence, her movements, the cadence of her voice. He pushed these thoughts aside as Anna stirred, awakened by the smell of coffee and the sounds of his preparation. It's time? She asked, immediately alert. Nathaniel nodded, pouring coffee into a tin cup and bringing it to her. Sun will be up soon. We should be on the trail by first light. Anna accepted the coffee gratefully, inhaling its aroma before taking a cautious sip. How many days to Denver? 5 if the weather holds and we make good time. Nathaniel returned to the stove to serve the breakfast. Corn mush sweetened with the last of his honey. Longer if we encounter problems. We will, Anna said matter-of-factly. Morgan's men won't give up easily. Nathaniel couldn't argue with her assessment. The price on Anna's head ensured they would face determined pursuit. Their only advantage was the difficulty of the route they'd chosen and their head start. They ate quickly, speaking little. The gravity of the journey ahead settled over them, pushing aside the more personal conversations of the previous evening. When they finished, Nathaniel cleared the dishes while Anna dressed for travel, adding layers of clothing to protect against the bitter mountain cold. Take this, Nathaniel said, handing her his spare revolver. 6 shots. Make them count if it comes to that. Anna accepted the weapon, checking it with practiced hands before tucking it into the waistband of her skirt. Another small revelation. She knew her way around firearms. My father taught me, she explained, catching his look. Said a woman alone needed to protect herself, especially one who wasn't fully accepted by either world. The statement revealed much about her life, caught between 2 cultures, belonging fully to neither. Nathaniel added it to his growing understanding of Ana Cortez, a woman whose complexity continued to surprise him. Outside, the eastern sky had lightened to a pale gray. Nathaniel loaded their packs onto the mare, distributing the weight carefully to avoid unbalancing the animal. They couldn't risk injury to their only mount, especially on the treacherous trails ahead. We'll ride double as far as Willow Creek, he explained, helping Anna mount. After that, the trail narrows. We'll have to lead her through the worst sections. Anna settled in the saddle, her injured leg positioned carefully to avoid strain. Nathaniel mounted behind her, acutely aware of her body pressed against his as he reached around her for the reins. The intimacy of the position was unavoidable, but unsettling. Ready? He asked, his voice close to her ear. Anna nodded, her posture straightening with determination. Let's go. With a final glance at the cabin, his sanctuary for so long, now abandoned for an uncertain journey, Nathaniel urged the mare forward. The morning was silent except for the creak of leather and the soft crunch of hooves on snow. Above them, the first golden rays of sunlight crested the mountains, illuminating the path ahead. They rode in silence for the first hour, following a narrow trail that wound through dense pine forest. The air was sharp and clean, burning in the lungs with each breath. Frost clung to tree branches and Nathaniel's beard, giving the world a crystalline quality that would have been beautiful under different circumstances. As the sun rose higher, Anna broke the silence. Do you think Morgan knows we're heading to Denver? Probably, Nathaniel admitted. The journalist is the logical destination. But he can't be certain of our route. Unless Cooper betrayed us. Nathaniel had considered this possibility. Possible, but I don't think so. His anger seemed genuine. So did Reardon's concern for my father's health right before he shot him. The bitterness in Anna's voice was palpable. Nathaniel had no response to that. Trust was a luxury they couldn't fully afford, not when the stakes were so high. By midday, they had climbed significantly higher into the mountains. The trail narrowed as Cooper's map had indicated, forcing them to dismount and lead the mare. Anna's limp was more pronounced after hours in the saddle, but she made no complaint, pushing forward with grim determination. They stopped briefly to rest and eat, jerky and hard biscuits, washed down with snow melted in their canteens. The valley stretched below them, the town of Pinecrest now a tiny collection of structures barely visible in the distance. From this height, Morgan's domain seemed insignificant, dwarfed by the vastness of the mountains. We should reach Willow Creek by nightfall, Nathaniel said, studying the map. There's an abandoned trapper's cabin where we can shelter. Anna nodded, her gaze fixed on the distant town. Do you see that? On the road from Pinecrest? Nathaniel followed her pointing finger, squinting against the bright reflection of sun on snow. There, on the main road heading north, the direction they had initially taken before cutting into the forest, were 4 riders moving at a steady pace. Morgan's men, Anna said quietly, looking for us. Nathaniel watched the distant figures for a moment longer before folding the map. Then we'd best not be found. Come on, we need to keep moving. They continued their journey, now even more conscious of the need for caution. The trail grew steeper, winding along ridge lines and skirting precipitous drops that plunged hundreds of feet to the rocky valleys below. In places, they had to clear snow to find the path, Nathaniel breaking trail while Anna led the increasingly nervous horse. By late afternoon, dark clouds had gathered over the western peaks, promising more snow before nightfall. The temperature dropped noticeably, the wind picking up with a mournful howl that echoed through the mountain passes. Nathaniel increased their pace as much as Anna's injury would allow, knowing that being caught in a storm on the exposed trail could be fatal. There, he said finally, pointing ahead to a dark shape nestled against a rocky outcropping. The cabin. The trapper's shelter was little more than a crude lean-to with walls of stacked logs, but after hours on the freezing trail, it looked like a palace. Nathaniel helped Anna dismount, noting with concern how she winced when her weight settled on her injured leg. "The wound?" he asked as they led the mare to the meager shelter of a stunted pine beside the cabin. Anna shook her head. "Just stiff from riding. I'll be fine." Nathaniel wasn't convinced, but he focused on securing the horse and unloading their essential supplies. The first snowflakes were already beginning to fall, dancing in the wind before settling on the frozen ground. Inside, the cabin was cold and musty, but reasonably intact. A stone fireplace dominated one wall, and a crude platform of logs served as a sleeping area. Nathaniel immediately set about building a fire while Anna arranged their bedrolls on the platform. "No windows," Anna observed, surveying their shelter. "Good for warmth, bad for watching approach." Nathaniel nodded, coaxing the kindling into a small flame. "We'll take turns on watch, though I doubt anyone will follow us up here in a snowstorm." Anna unwrapped a package of pemmican, a mixture of dried meat, fat, and berries that she had prepared according to Ute traditions. "My people have tracked enemies through worse," she said, offering him a portion. "Never underestimate a determined hunter." The fire caught properly, filling the small space with flickering orange light and blessed warmth. Outside, the snow fell more heavily, the wind driving it horizontally across the landscape. They ate in companionable silence, listening to the storm's fury. After the meal, Nathaniel insisted on checking Anna's wound. The day's exertion had irritated it slightly, but there was no serious damage. He applied more of Solomon's medicine and rewrapped the bandage. "You should sleep first," he said, moving to sit by the door where he could monitor both the cabin's entrance and Anna. "I'll take first watch." Anna looked as though she might argue, but exhaustion won out. She settled into her bedroll, pulling the blanket up to her chin. "Wake me in 4 hours. No heroics, doctor." Nathaniel nodded, though he had every intention of letting her sleep longer. She needed rest more than he did. Her body was still healing, and tomorrow would be another difficult day. As Anna's breathing deepened into sleep, Nathaniel stared into the fire, his thoughts turning to the journey ahead. They had evaded Morgan's men today, but luck wouldn't always be on their side. Sooner or later, they would face direct confrontation. When that moment came, he had to be prepared to do whatever was necessary to protect Anna and her father's work. The realization should have troubled him more than it did. 6 months ago, he would have balked at the idea of risking his life for a cause that wasn't his own. But now, watching the firelight play across Anna's sleeping face, Nathaniel understood that something fundamental had changed. Her mission had become his as well, not just because it was right, but because she had awakened something in him he'd thought long dead, a sense of purpose beyond mere survival. Outside, the storm raged against the mountains, snow piling against the cabin's walls. Inside, a man who had chosen solitude found himself contemplating a different path, one that led not away from the world and its troubles, but directly into their midst, with a woman whose strength and determination had begun to heal wounds he'd carried for far too long. Dawn broke with painful slowness, the feeble light struggling to penetrate the thick layer of fresh snow that had accumulated during the night. Inside the trapper's cabin, Nathaniel stirred the embers of their fire, adding the last pieces of wood they had gathered before the storm hit. The small flame cast dancing shadows across the rough walls, but did little to dispel the bone-deep cold that had settled during the night. Anna slept on, her breathing deep and even. Nathaniel had never woken her for her watch, choosing instead to keep vigil through the long hours of darkness. He studied her now in the dim light. The strong lines of her face softened in sleep, the intricate braid of her dark hair coming loose around her shoulders. In repose, the fierce determination that animated her features had given way to a vulnerability that made something tighten in his chest. He looked away, uncomfortable with the direction of his thoughts. They had more pressing concerns than the unexpected feelings developing between them. The storm had delayed their journey, and every hour increased the risk of Morgan's men finding their trail. Outside, Nathaniel checked on the mare, brushing away the snow that had accumulated on the crude lean-to they had constructed for shelter. The animal nickered softly in recognition, steam rising from her nostrils in the frigid air. The sky above was clearing, the storm having spent its fury during the night, but the temperature had dropped significantly. The snow crunched beneath his boots, frozen solid in the bitter cold. When he returned to the cabin, Anna was awake, already rolling up her bedding with efficient movements. "You didn't wake me," she said, an accusation in her tone. "You needed the rest more than I did," Nathaniel replied, adding snow to their pot to melt for coffee. Anna frowned but didn't argue. Instead, she moved to the doorway, surveying the transformed landscape. The fresh snow blanketed everything, erasing landmarks and softening the rugged terrain into gentle, flowing curves. Beautiful but treacherous. "How much farther to the next shelter?" she asked. Nathaniel consulted Cooper's map, tracing their route with a gloved finger. "Eagle Pass is about 7 miles. Difficult terrain. Then another 5 to the old mining cabin where we can spend the night." 12 miles in these conditions? Anna's expression was dubious as she glanced at the deep snow outside. "With one horse between us?" "We don't have a choice," Nathaniel said grimly. "We're exposed here. The storm covered our tracks, but once it clears completely, Morgan's men will be searching." They ate a hasty breakfast of cold pemmican, saving the coffee for their canteens. The hot liquid would provide welcome warmth on the trail. As they packed their meager supplies, Nathaniel noticed Anna testing her injured leg, putting weight on it carefully. "How is it?" he asked. "Stiff, but functional," she replied with characteristic practicality. Solomon's medicine helped. They set out as the sun crested the eastern mountains, casting long blue shadows across the pristine snow. The mare struggled through the drifts, forcing them to break trail on foot. They took turns leading the way, Nathaniel insisting on taking the longer shifts to spare Anna's injured leg. Progress was painfully slow, each mile earned through grueling effort. By midday, they had covered barely 4 miles. They paused in the shelter of a rocky overhang to rest and eat. Anna's face was flushed with exertion, her breathing labored, though she made no complaint. Nathaniel could see the pain in her eyes, however, in the rigid way she held herself when she thought he wasn't looking. "Let me check your leg," he said, kneeling beside her in the snow. Anna began to protest but stopped at his expression. She extended her leg reluctantly, allowing him to roll up the layers of fabric. The bandage showed a small spot of fresh blood. The wound had reopened slightly from the strain of their journey. "It's nothing," she insisted when she saw his frown. "It's not nothing," Nathaniel countered, reaching into his pack for fresh bandages and Solomon's medicine. "If it gets infected up here, we're in serious trouble." He worked quickly, cleaning and rebandaging the wound with practiced hands. Anna watched him, her expression unreadable. "We should turn back," she said suddenly. Nathaniel looked up, surprised. "What?" "To your cabin. Wait until spring, when the passes are clear." Her voice was tight with suppressed pain. "This is madness, trying to cross the mountains in winter." "You were the one insisting we couldn't wait," Nathaniel reminded her, securing the bandage. "That was before I realized how much I'd slow us down." Anna's gaze was direct, unflinching. "The truth is, I'm a liability like this, and there is too much at stake for me to be the reason we fail." Nathaniel finished with the bandage and sat back on his heels, studying her. "Then, is that what you really want, to turn back?" Anna looked away, her profile sharp against the white landscape. "What I want is for my father's work to reach Denver, for Morgan to face justice, for the miners to receive treatment." Her hands clenched in her lap. "But I'm not sure this is the way." "There is no other way," Nathaniel said quietly. "The main roads are watched. Your leg will heal, but the miners Morgan is killing don't have that luxury." He stood, offering his hand to help her up. "We keep going, together." Anna hesitated, then took his hand, allowing him to pull her to her feet. For a moment, they stood close, their joined hands between them, something unspoken passing in their shared gaze. Together then, she agreed softly. They continued their journey, the terrain growing more challenging as they approached Eagle Pass. The trail narrowed to a treacherous ledge in places, forcing them to lead the increasingly nervous mare with utmost care. Below them, sheer drops of hundreds of feet ended in jagged rocks partially concealed by snow. One misstep would mean certain death. As the afternoon wore on, the wind picked up, cutting through their layers of clothing with icy precision. The clear sky that had seemed a blessing that morning now exposed them fully to the elements, offering no protection from the biting cold. Look, Anna said suddenly, pointing to a rock formation ahead. Eagle Pass. The natural gateway stood as Cooper's map had indicated, two towering columns of stone that resembled the spread wings of a massive bird. Between them, the trail continued, beginning its gradual descent toward the eastern side of the mountains. We're making better time than I expected, Nathaniel observed, checking the position of the sun. We might reach the mining cabin before dark after all. As they approached the pass, Anna suddenly raised her hand, signaling for a stop. She stood perfectly still, head tilted slightly, listening. What is it? Nathaniel asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Horses, Anna replied, her expression tense. More than one, coming from the east. Nathaniel strained his ears and caught it then, the faint sound of hoofbeats crunching through snow, still distant but approaching the pass from the opposite direction. Morgan's men, almost certainly. No ordinary travelers would be on this treacherous trail in winter. How many? He asked, already scanning their surroundings for cover. 3, maybe 4, Anna estimated, moving fast. They had seconds to decide their course of action. The trail offered no place to hide, sheer rock faces on one side, deadly drops on the other. Going back would mean running directly into the approaching riders. Their only option was to find a defensive position and make a stand. There, Nathaniel pointed to a cluster of boulders just beyond the pass. We can use those for cover. They hurried forward, leading the mare through the narrow passage between the stone columns. On the other side, Nathaniel quickly tied the horse behind the largest boulder, out of the immediate line of fire. He helped Anna into position, then withdrew his rifle from its scabbard. Take this, he said, handing her the weapon. You're a better shot than I am with the revolver. Anna accepted the rifle without argument, checking the action with practiced movements. Nathaniel positioned himself beside her, his revolver drawn and ready. The approaching hoofbeats grew louder, echoing between the rock walls of the pass. Remember, he said quietly, we just need to discourage them, not kill them all. Make the first shots count, and they might decide we're not worth the trouble. Anna's expression suggested she had other ideas about Reardon and his men, but she nodded her agreement. They settled into position, using the boulders for cover, waiting as the riders drew closer. The first horseman appeared at the far end of the pass, a burly man in a heavy coat, rifle resting across his saddle. Behind him came 3 more riders, spread out in a loose formation that suggested military experience. Nathaniel recognized the lead rider from Pinecrest, one of the men who had been watching Solomon's shop. Wait until they're fully in the pass, he murmured to Anna. No escape route. She nodded, sighting down the barrel of the rifle with calm precision. Her breathing had steadied, her earlier pain seemingly forgotten in the focus of the moment. Nathaniel was reminded that this woman had survived on her own for days while being hunted by Morgan's men. She was no stranger to danger. The riders entered the pass, their movements confident, unaware of the ambush ahead. When the last man had cleared the stone columns, Anna fired. The shot cracked through the mountain silence with devastating effect, catching the lead rider in the shoulder and knocking him from his horse. Before the others could react, Nathaniel fired twice, forcing them to scatter for cover. Chaos erupted in the narrow confines of the pass. Horses reared and screamed, men shouted conflicting orders, and the deafening report of gunfire echoed off the stone walls. Anna fired again, her aim deliberate, winging a second rider who cursed and dropped his weapon. That's Riordan's man, Weber, she said with grim satisfaction. Nathaniel ducked as bullets whined overhead, chipping fragments from the boulders protecting them. The remaining riders had recovered from their initial surprise and were returning fire with determination, trying to flank their position. They're trying to get around us, Nathaniel warned, firing again to keep them pinned down. Anna shifted her position, bringing the rifle to bear on the rider attempting to circle behind them. She squeezed the trigger, and the man jerked backward, his horse bolting in panic. Not a killing shot, but enough to discourage further flanking attempts. The gunfight continued for several tense minutes, neither side able to gain a decisive advantage. Then, unexpectedly, a voice called out from behind the rider's position. "Dr. Reed! Miss Cortez, hold your fire!" Nathaniel and Anna exchanged a startled glance. The voice was familiar. Sheriff Cooper. "It's a trap," Anna whispered, her knuckles white around the rifle. "They're trying to draw us out." "Maybe," Nathaniel conceded. "Or maybe we have an unexpected ally." Cooper's voice came again. "Reardon's men are down. It's just me now." To prove his point, a badge flashed in the sunlight as Cooper slowly emerged from behind a rock, his empty hands raised. Behind him, the remaining riders were indeed down, one clutching a bleeding leg, the other lying ominously still. "I'm coming forward," Cooper called. "Don't shoot." Nathaniel kept his revolver trained on the sheriff as the older man carefully picked his way through the scattered rocks and frightened horses. Anna's rifle remained steady, her trust far from given. Cooper stopped a safe distance away, his hand still raised. "Didn't expect to find you two so capable," he remarked with grim humor. "Took out two of Reardon's best men before I could even get into position." "What are you doing here, Sheriff?" Nathaniel demanded, not lowering his weapon. "Same as you, trying to get to Denver." Cooper slowly reached into his vest, freezing when both Nathaniel and Anna tensed. "Easy now, just showing you something." He withdrew a folded document, holding it up for them to see. "Affidavit, my testimony about Morgan's operations, the deaths, the cover-ups. Thought it might help your case with that journalist." Anna's rifle barrel dipped slightly, confusion crossing her features. "You're helping us? Why now? Why not back in Pinecrest?" Cooper's weathered face hardened. "Because Reardon figured out I was sympathetic to your cause. Came to my office last night, made threats. Said Morgan was losing patience with my lack of cooperation." His mouth twisted bitterly. "I've spent 30 years wearing this badge, trying to stand for something. Couldn't stomach being Morgan's puppet any longer." Nathaniel studied the sheriff carefully, looking for any sign of deception. He saw only exhaustion and a kind of desperate resolve in the older man's eyes. "How did you find us?" he asked. "Followed Reardon's men," Cooper replied. "They picked up your trail where you left the main road. I've been tracking them since yesterday." He gestured to the fallen riders. "Was planning to warn you before they caught up, but you handled that part yourselves." Anna finally lowered her rifle, though her expression remained wary. "Is Reardon with them?" Cooper shook his head. "No, he's still in Pinecrest coordinating the search. These were just his advanced scouts." He looked over his shoulder at the injured men. "They won't be reporting back anytime soon, but more will come." "We need to move," Nathaniel decided, holstering his revolver, "before the weather turns again." They gathered their belongings quickly, Nathaniel keeping a watchful eye on Cooper, while Anna prepared the mare. The sheriff helped secure one of the injured men to his own horse, instructing him to ride back for help. "What about him?" Anna nodded toward the motionless rider, her voice devoid of emotion. Cooper checked the man briefly. "Dead. Bullet caught him just right." He glanced at Anna, something like respect in his gaze. "You're shot?" She nodded once, her expression unreadable. Nathaniel watched her, concerned by the flat look in her eyes. Taking a life, even in self-defense, left marks on the soul. He knew that better than most. They left the pass behind, 3 riders on 2 horses, following the trail as it wound downward toward the eastern slopes. Cooper rode ahead, his local knowledge proving valuable as they navigated the treacherous terrain. Nathaniel and Anna followed on the mare, their bodies pressed close by necessity. "Are you all right?" Nathaniel asked quietly, feeling the tension in Anna's back where it rested against his chest. "I've never killed a man before," she replied after a long pause. Her voice was steady, but Nathaniel could hear the subtle tremor beneath her words. "I thought I would feel something. Satisfaction, maybe. Justice for my father." Well, she shook her head slightly. "I just feel cold." Nathaniel understood. The first time he had taken a life, a Confederate soldier who had surprised him in a field hospital, he had felt the same numbing emptiness followed later by waves of guilt and self-recrimination that threatened to drown him. It never gets easier, he said honestly. Not if you're the kind of person who should be doing it. Anna was silent for a long moment, absorbing his words. Then almost imperceptibly, she leaned back against him, accepting the small comfort of human contact. Nathaniel tightened his arm around her waist, an instinctive gesture of protection and support. They rode in silence for the next hour, each lost in private thoughts as the landscape gradually changed around them. The stark, snow-covered peaks gave way to more gentle slopes, dotted with pine and aspen. The air grew marginally warmer as they descended, though darkness would bring freezing temperatures again. Cooper led them off of the main trail as the sun began its descent, following a barely visible path that curved around the shoulder of the mountain. After another half-mile, a small structure came into view, the abandoned mining cabin that would shelter them for the night. Unlike the crude trappers' lean-to, this cabin had been built for longer-term habitation. Its walls were solid logs chinked with mud and moss, and a stone chimney rose from the sloped roof. The door hung crookedly on leather hinges, but the structure itself appeared sound. Used to be the foreman's cabin for the Blue Eagle mine, Cooper explained as they dismounted. Played out 10 years ago. Trappers and hunters use it occasionally, so there should be some firewood inside. Nathaniel helped Anna down, noting how she winced when her weight settled on her injured leg. The long ride and the stress of the gunfight had taken their toll. Cooper noticed as well, his brow furrowing with concern. "Wound giving you trouble?" he asked. Anna straightened, masking her discomfort with practiced ease. "Nothing I can't handle." Cooper nodded, not pressing the issue. "I'll see to the horses. You two get a fire started." Inside, the cabin was dusty but intact. A crude table and two stools occupied the center of the single room, and a platform bed stood against one wall. A stone fireplace dominated the opposite wall, a small stack of wood beside it, left by previous occupants, as Cooper had predicted. Nathaniel immediately set about building a fire while Anna explored the cabin's meager furnishings. She found a dented pot and several cups, which she took outside to clean with snow. By the time Cooper joined them, the fire was crackling cheerfully, pushing back the gathering darkness and filling the cabin with welcome warmth. "How's the leg?" Nathaniel asked Anna quietly as she settled beside the fire. "Bleeding again," she admitted, too tired to maintain pretense. "Not badly, but it's painful." Nathaniel retrieved the medical supplies from their packs, gesturing for Anna to extend her leg. Cooper busied himself melting snow for coffee, giving them a semblance of privacy. The wound looked worse than Nathaniel had feared. The day's exertion had torn some of the healing tissue, and the edges showed signs of inflammation. He cleaned it carefully, applying the last of Solomon's antibiotic powder before rebandaging it with fresh cloth. "You need rest," he said firmly. "A full day, at least." Anna shook her head, her jaw set stubbornly. "We can't afford to stop." "We can't afford for you to lose that leg to infection either," Nathaniel countered. "One day, then we continue." Cooper joined the conversation, offering them cups of steaming coffee. "He's right, Miss Cortez. I know these mountains. Next stretch is the hardest yet. 15 miles of rough country before we reach safer terrain. You'll need your strength." Anna looked from Nathaniel to Cooper, recognizing the logic of their argument but clearly frustrated by the delay. Finally, she nodded reluctantly. "One day, no more." With the decision made, they settled into the routine of making camp, preparing a simple meal, arranging bedrolls, establishing watches for the night. Cooper volunteered for the first shift, positioning himself near the cabin's single window where he could observe the approach trail. As night fully claimed the mountain, Nathaniel found himself watching Anna as she sat by the fire, her father's journal open in her lap. She studied the pages with intense concentration, occasionally making notes in the margins with a stub of pencil. The firelight played across her features, highlighting the strong line of her jaw, the delicate arch of her cheekbones, the determined set of her mouth. She must have sensed his gaze, for she looked up suddenly, her dark eyes meeting his across the flames. Something unspoken passed between them, an acknowledgement of the bond that had formed during their journey, forged through shared danger and mutual respect. "You should sleep," she said softly. "I'll wake you for second watch." Nathaniel nodded, though they both knew he would likely let her sleep through the night again. He stretched out on his bedroll, his body aching from the day's exertions, yet his mind remained alert, processing the events at Eagle Pass and their implications. Morgan's men had found their trail once. They would do so again, especially now that they knew the general direction of their flight. The addition of Cooper to their party was an unexpected development, potentially valuable for his knowledge of the terrain and his testimony against Morgan, but also another responsibility, another life Nathaniel was now committed to protecting. As exhaustion finally claimed him, Nathaniel's last conscious thought was of Anna's face in the firelight, and the realization that somewhere along this dangerous journey, his commitment to her cause had become something far more personal than he had ever intended. Nathaniel woke to the sound of quiet conversation. Dawn light filtered through the cabin's small window, casting a pale square on the rough wooden floor. Cooper and Anna sat at the table, heads bent over the maps, discussing routes and landmarks in low voices. "The trouble spot is here," Cooper was saying, his finger tracing a line on the paper. "Narrow trail, steep drop-off. If Reardon has any sense, he'll post men there. Natural choke point." Anna nodded, her expression grave. "Can we go around?" "Adds another day, but yes, there's an old game trail that branches north, follows the ridgeline." Cooper sketched the alternative route. "Less used, harder to track." Nathaniel rose, folding his blanket with practiced efficiency. "How's the leg this morning?" he asked Anna. "Better," she replied, and indeed she looked more rested, the pain lines around her eyes less pronounced. "Your medicine worked." Cooper glanced between them, a knowing look in his weathered face. "I checked the horses at first light. No sign of pursuit yet, but we should assume they're coming." They shared a quick breakfast of jerky and hard biscuits, washing it down with the last of their coffee. Despite the agreed-upon day of rest, an unspoken tension filled the cabin, the awareness that each hour increased the risk of discovery. "I need to check our back trail," Cooper announced, pulling on his coat. "Make sure we don't have any unwelcome visitors." When he had gone, Nathaniel took the opportunity to examine Anna's wound again. The inflammation had indeed subsided, and the bleeding had stopped. His relief must have shown on his face, for Anna smiled slightly. "Told you it was better," she said. Nathaniel replaced the bandage, his hands lingering perhaps longer than strictly necessary. "Even so, we take it easy today. Short walks to keep the muscles from stiffening, but no strenuous activity." Anna caught his hand as he withdrew, her fingers warm against his. "Thank you," she said simply. "For all of this. I wouldn't have made it this far without you." The sincerity in her voice made something tighten in Nathaniel's chest. He turned his hand to clasp hers properly, a gesture that felt both natural and significant. "You'd have found a way," he said, believing it. "You're the most determined woman I've ever met." Anna's smile widened slightly, bringing a warmth to her usually serious features. "Is that a compliment, Dr. Reed?" "A statement of fact, Miss Cortez." But he was smiling too, the banter between them easier now, comfortable. The moment was interrupted by Cooper's return, his expression grim as he stamped snow from his boots at the doorway. "Riders," he announced without preamble. "6 of them following our trail from the pass, moving fast." The atmosphere in the cabin shifted instantly from warm companionship to alert tension. Nathaniel rose, mentally calculating distances and times. "How far?" he asked. 3 miles, maybe less," Cooper replied, moving to the window to scan the approach. "They'll be here within the hour." Anna was already gathering their belongings, her movements quick and decisive. "So much for our day of rest." "Wait," Nathaniel said, raising a hand. "Let's think this through. If we run now, they'll just follow our tracks. Fresh snow means a clear trail." Cooper nodded his agreement. "He's right, we need a different approach." "What do you suggest?" Anna asked, tension evident in her voice. The men exchanged a look, a plan already forming between them. "Ambush," Cooper said simply. "Same as at the pass, but this time we choose the ground." Anna's eyes widened slightly, then narrowed in consideration. "Where?" "There's a narrow ravine about a mile east," Cooper explained. "Steep walls, single-file passage. Perfect spot to neutralize their advantage of numbers." Nathaniel was already checking his revolver, mentally reviewing their ammunition supplies. "We'll need positions on both sides of the ravine. Crossfire." They moved with practiced efficiency, gathering only essential supplies, weapons, ammunition, water, and basic medical supplies. Everything else would be left behind. The pretense of normal travel was abandoned. This was now a tactical retreat. Outside, Cooper saddled the horses while Nathaniel helped Anna into her coat. Her face was pale but determined, her movements controlled despite the pain she must still be feeling. "Are you sure about this?" Nathaniel asked quietly. "We could try to outrun them." Anna shook her head. "Cooper's right. They'll just follow our tracks. Better to deal with them now on our terms." She checked the rifle Nathaniel had given her hands steady and capable. "Besides, I owe Reardon for my father. And for this." She gestured to her injured leg. Nathaniel recognized the dangerous mix of determination and vengeance in her eyes. "This isn't about revenge, Anna. It's about survival." "Can it be both?" she countered, but her expression softened slightly at his concern. "I won't do anything foolish, if that's what you're worried about." They rode east at a trot, Cooper leading the way to the ravine he had described. The morning was clear and cold, the sun glinting off the snow with painful brightness. Under different circumstances, the beauty of the mountain landscape would have been breathtaking. Now it was merely the backdrop for a deadly confrontation. The ravine appeared exactly as Cooper had described, a narrow cleft between towering rock walls, barely wide enough for a single horse to pass. At its eastern end, the trail emerged onto a small plateau before continuing down toward the foothills. The perfect place for an ambush. "I'll take the north side," Cooper decided, dismounting and securing his horse behind a cluster of boulders. "You two take the south. Wait until they're all in the ravine before firing." Nathaniel helped Anna to their position, a natural shelf about 20 feet up the ravine wall, offering both cover and a clear view of the passage below. He arranged rocks to provide additional protection, then settled beside her with his revolver ready. "Remember," he said quietly, "aim for the horses first. Unmounted men in deep snow are limited in their options." Anna nodded, her expression focused as she sighted down the rifle barrel, testing her field of fire. Cooper had positioned himself similarly on the opposite wall, his experienced eye evaluating angles and distances. Then came the waiting, the most difficult part of any ambush. Minutes stretched endlessly as the morning advanced, the sun climbing higher in the cloudless sky. Nathaniel found himself hyper-aware of every sound, the soft sigh of the wind through the pines, the occasional creak of settling snow, the steady rhythm of Anna's breathing beside him. It was Anna who heard them first, her body tensing as she caught the distant sound of hoofbeats. "Coming," she whispered, adjusting her position slightly for a better angle. Nathaniel strained his ears and caught it then, the unmistakable sound of multiple horses approaching at a trot. Across the ravine, Cooper had also heard, signaling his readiness with a raised hand. The first rider appeared at the western entrance to the ravine, a tall man in a black coat, rifle balanced across his saddle. Even at a distance, Nathaniel recognized the confident posture, the air of authority. Callum Reardon himself, leading the pursuit. Behind him came 5 more riders, all heavily armed, spread out in a practiced formation. Anna's breath caught when she saw Reardon. Her finger tightened on the rifle's trigger, and for a moment Nathaniel feared she would fire prematurely, driven by the raw emotion of confronting her father's killer. He placed a steadying hand on her arm, a silent reminder of their plan. She glanced at him, a complex mix of emotions in her dark eyes, then nodded once and returned her attention to the approaching riders. Her breathing steadied, her posture relaxed into the calm focus of an experienced marksman. Reardon hesitated at the entrance to the ravine, studying the narrow passage with obvious suspicion. He signaled for 2 of his men to dismount and advance on foot, scanning the rock walls for any sign of an ambush. The caution of a man who had survived many dangerous situations. Nathaniel and Anna pressed themselves lower behind their cover as the men passed beneath their position, rifles ready. Across the ravine, Cooper remained perfectly still, a shadow among shadows. The dismounted men moved slowly through the ravine, checking each possible hiding place with methodical thoroughness. Finding nothing, they signaled the all-clear to Reardon, who nudged his horse forward into the narrow passage. The remaining riders followed, maintaining their spacing as they navigated the confined space. Cooper's signal came when the last rider had entered the ravine, a sharp whistle that echoed between the rock walls. Instantly, Anna fired, her shot striking Reardon's horse in the shoulder. The animal screamed and reared, throwing its rider before collapsing in the snow. Chaos erupted as Nathaniel and Cooper opened fire from their elevated positions, bullets ricocheting off rock and metal with deadly precision. The ravine became a killing ground, with the riders caught in a devastating crossfire with nowhere to retreat. Two men went down in the initial volley, one dead before he hit the ground, the other wounded and screaming. The surviving riders returned fire desperately, bullets chipping stone inches from Nathaniel's head. He ducked lower, pulling Anna down beside him as a fusillade of shots peppered their position. "Reardon," he shouted over the deafening gunfire. Anna risked a glance over their cover. Down but moving, behind his horse. Cooper maintained steady fire from his position, methodically targeting each rider. His experience showed in his economy of movement, his careful shot selection. Another man fell, clutching his chest as he toppled from the saddle. The gunfight continued for several frantic minutes, neither side able to gain a decisive advantage. Then Nathaniel noticed movement at the eastern end of the ravine. One of the riders had broken free and was circling back, attempting to flank their position. "Anna," he shouted, pointing out the threat. She swung the rifle around, tracking the moving rider, but before she could fire, a shot from below caught her in the shoulder, spinning her backward with its impact. Nathaniel's world narrowed to a single point. Anna crumpled against the rock, blood spreading across her coat sleeve. Cold fury replaced fear as he returned fire, emptying his revolver at the shooter below. From his peripheral vision, he saw Cooper take down the flanking rider with a precise shot to the chest. Only Riordan remained now, sheltered behind his fallen horse. Nathaniel reloaded quickly, his attention divided between the threat below and Anna's condition beside him. "How bad?" he asked tersely, not taking his eyes off Riordan's position. Anna had pressed a hand to her shoulder, blood seeping between her fingers. "Clean through," she managed, her voice tight with pain but steady. "I can still shoot." As if to prove it, she struggled to a sitting position, bringing the rifle to bear one-handed. Her face was pale but determined, her jaw set with grim purpose. Below, Riordan must have realized his untenable position. "Cooper!" he called, his voice echoing in the sudden quiet. "I know you're up there. Let's talk this through." "Nothing to talk about, Riordan," Cooper shouted back. "You killed Miguel Cortez, tried to kill his daughter. How many miners have died for Morgan's profits?" "This isn't about Morgan anymore," Riordan replied. "He doesn't even know I'm here. This is personal." Anna's eyes narrowed at this unexpected revelation. She and Nathaniel exchanged a glance, both recognizing the implications. If Riordan was acting on his own initiative, without Morgan's direct orders, it changed the dynamics of their situation. "What do you mean, personal?" Cooper demanded, maintaining his aim on Riordan's position. "The formula," Riordan called back. "The treatment Cortez developed. I need it." Anna's expression shifted from suspicion to confusion. "What does he want with the formula?" she whispered to Nathaniel. The answer came in Riordan's next words, tinged with desperation beneath the bravado. "My son worked those mines for 5 years. He's dying from the same sickness that killed Cooper's brother. The company doctor says there's nothing to be done." A stunned silence followed this revelation. Nathaniel could see the conflict in Anna's face as she processed this unexpected dimension to her father's killer. "Why kill my father then?" she finally shouted, her voice raw with emotion. "He was trying to help." "Morgan's orders," Riordan replied, his tone hardening. "He didn't want the sickness exposed, bad for business. I was just following orders then." A pause. "But this is different. This is my son." Nathaniel and Cooper exchanged glances across the ravine, each reading the other's thoughts. The situation had become infinitely more complex. If Riordan was telling the truth and his desperation suggested he was, they faced not just a hired killer, but a father trying to save his child. "We can end this now," Nathaniel said quietly to Anna. "We have him outnumbered, outpositioned. One more shot, and it's over." Anna's expression was troubled, the rifle barrel dipping slightly as she considered. For all her determination to reach Denver with the formula, for all her justified anger toward her father's killer, Nathaniel saw the compassion that was equally fundamental to her character. "If what he says is true," she said slowly, "his son is dying from the same disease my father was trying to cure." Her eyes met Nathaniel's, searching for understanding. "What would my father do?" It was not really a question, Nathaniel realized. Anna already knew the answer. Miguel Cortez had dedicated his life to healing, to alleviating suffering wherever he found it. His daughter carried not just his research, but his ethical framework, his commitment to preserving life. Cooper, Nathaniel called. Hold your fire. We're coming down to talk. Are you crazy? Cooper shouted back. This is Reardon we're dealing with. Just cover us, Nathaniel replied, already helping Anna to her feet. Her wounded shoulder needed attention, but she waved off his concern, her focus entirely on the confrontation ahead. They descended carefully, Anna leaning on Nathaniel for support, the rifle still ready in her good hand. Cooper maintained his elevated position, providing cover as they approached Riordan's makeshift barricade. Riordan watched their approach with wary suspicion, his own weapon trained on them. Blood stained the snow around him, his own from a wound in his leg and that of his fallen horse. That's far enough, he said when they were 10 feet away. Anna stopped, studying the man who had killed her father, torn between hatred and the healer's instinct that was her inheritance. You say your son has the lung sickness? Reardon nodded, his weathered face showing genuine anguish beneath the hard exterior. Stage 3, can barely breathe. The company doctor gave him 3 months. His grip tightened on his revolver. I need that formula. So you can give it to Morgan, Anna challenged, so he can control who lives and who dies based on loyalty and profit? No, Reardon's response was immediate and forceful. Just for my boy. Morgan doesn't know I'm here. This is on my own time, my own risk. Anna was silent for a long moment, weighing his words against the evidence of her eyes, the desperate father visible beneath the ruthless enforcer. Finally, she lowered her rifle slightly. My father believed healing wasn't a privilege to be bought or controlled, she said, her voice steady despite the blood still seeping from her shoulder. It was a right that belonged to everyone suffering. Reardon's expression tightened, recognizing the implied judgment, but too desperate to dispute it. What are you saying? I'm saying the formula isn't just for your son, Anna replied. It's for every miner dying of this sickness. Every family watching a father or brother waste away. That's what we're taking to Denver. Not just the treatment, but the truth about Morgan's mines. Understanding dawned in Reardon's eyes, followed quickly by calculation. Nathaniel tensed, ready to intervene if the man made any sudden moves toward Anna. You want me to betray Morgan, Reardon said flatly, after 15 years in his service. I want you to choose between loyalty to a man who sees miners as disposable tools and saving your son, along with hundreds of others, Anna countered, the choice my father never got to make. The silence that followed was heavy with the weight of moral reckoning. Reardon's gaze shifted from Anna to Nathaniel, then up to Cooper's position on the ravine wall. He was outnumbered, wounded, with no realistic escape. But beyond the tactical assessment, Nathaniel could see the internal struggle of a man forced to confront the consequences of years of unquestioning loyalty. What's your offer? Reardon asked finally. Come with us to Denver, Anna said without hesitation. Testify against Morgan. Add your evidence to Cooper's, to my father's research. In return, I'll treat your son with the formula myself. Reardon laughed harshly. You think Morgan would let my boy live once I turned on him? He'd make an example of him before I even reached Denver. Then send for your son, Nathaniel suggested, speaking for the first time. Have him meet us in Denver. Once the story breaks, Morgan's power will be broken too. Reardon considered this, his expression unreadable. And my men? He gestured to the fallen riders around the ravine. Just leave them here? The wounded can ride back to Pinecrest, Cooper called down from his position. Bury the dead. That's more than Miguel Cortez got. Another long silence followed as Reardon weighed his options. Finally, with the reluctant pragmatism of a survivor, he nodded once. I'll need paper to write to my son. Tell him where to meet us. Anna and Nathaniel exchanged a glance, both recognizing the risk in accepting Reardon's apparent surrender. But they also understood the moral imperative that had brought them to this point, the belief that healing and truth must prevail over vengeance and expediency. Lower your weapon first, Nathaniel instructed. Reardon hesitated, then slowly placed his revolver on the snow beside him. Now what? Now I treat that leg, Anna said, her healer's instinct overriding personal animosity. Then we all ride for Denver. Together. As Anna moved forward to examine Riordan's wound, Nathaniel watched the transformation, from vengeful daughter to healer, happen in real time. It was a choice few could make: to kneel beside your father's murderer and offer healing instead of harm. In that moment, the final barrier within Nathaniel broke. What he felt for Anna transcended mere admiration or respect. It was love, not despite the contradictions within her, but because of the whole complex person she had revealed herself to be. Her capacity to balance justice with mercy, strength with tenderness, spoke to something he had lost in himself long ago and was only now rediscovering. The realization settled over him with the clarity of absolute certainty. Whatever happened in Denver, whatever challenges still lay ahead, Nathaniel knew his life had been irrevocably changed. The solitary existence he had chosen after Sarah's death now seemed a hollow echo of true living. As Cooper descended to help with the wounded, and the mountain silence returned after the chaos of battle, Nathaniel made a silent promise to himself and to the remarkable woman before him. They would reach Denver. They would expose Morgan's crimes. And afterward, if Anna was willing, they would find a new path forward, together. As they prepared for the final leg of their journey, Nathaniel realized that something fundamental had shifted within him. For years after Sarah's death, he had been a man waiting to die, merely existing in his mountain solitude. Now, with the prospect of Denver and whatever lay beyond, he found himself a man eager to live again. The irony wasn't lost on him, that in helping Anna deliver her father's healing remedy to the world, his own long-neglected spirit had begun to mend. Denver, Colorado, 3 months later, the snow had melted on the mountaintops, giving way to the green hues of spring spreading across the valley. From the window of a small clinic on Larimer Street, Nathaniel Reed observed the bustling flow of people on Denver's busy streets. The Rocky Mountain News lay open on the table, its headlines still causing a stir after 2 weeks. Congressional report confirms Morgan Cole found guilty of disease cover-up, company dissolved. Below was a photograph of Anna standing beside Samuel Fletcher, the journalist who had tirelessly pursued this story. Outside the clinic, a line of patients waited patiently. Miners with persistent coughs, women with feverish children, and even a few Ute individuals who had traveled from distant settlements, drawn by rumors of a healer who bridged two worlds. Still reading that? Anna entered, holding a freshly prepared bottle of medicine. The wound on her shoulder had healed, leaving only a thin scar as a memento of their journey. Nathaniel smiled at her. Hard to believe we actually did it. We, Cooper, and even Riordan, Anna added, placing the medicine bottle on the table. Any news from them? Cooper wrote yesterday, Nathaniel replied, picking up a letter from his desk. He's been appointed sheriff in a newly settled area up north. Says he's finally wearing his badge with pride again. And Riordan? His son is responding well to the treatment. They've settled in California, far from Morgan's remaining allies. Nathaniel's expression softened. He included this. He handed Anna a small daguerreotype. In it, a young man sat in a chair by a window, color visibly returned to his formerly pale face. Beside the photograph was a simple note. You gave him his life back. I can never repay that debt. Anna studied the image, her fingers tracing the edge of the photograph. My father would have wanted this. To see his work helping people, even the son of... She didn't finish the sentence. Choosing to forgive her father's killer hadn't been easy, but somehow it had helped her heal her own wounds. The journal that had once been her burden was now open knowledge, the formula published and distributed to doctors throughout the mining territories. The last of the settlement money came through, Nathaniel said, changing the subject. The miners' families will receive compensation for their losses. Anna nodded, moving to the cabinet where rows of bottles contained her father's medicine, now produced in quantities that would have seemed impossible months ago. Not that money can replace what they lost. No, Nathaniel agreed, but justice matters. Accountability matters. Through the window, they could see the territorial capitol building where the hearings had been held. For 2 grueling weeks, Anna had testified about her father's research, Cooper about the cover-up, and Riordan about Morgan's direct orders. The mining magnate now awaited trial in a federal prison. What about us? She asked softly, stepping beside Nathaniel. Have you thought more about the medical association's offer? Nathaniel gazed out the window for a moment. Their small clinic had quickly become renowned in Denver, a place that combined Western medicine with traditional Ute healing practices. The Colorado Medical Association wanted them to expand, to train others in this integrated approach. "I've been thinking about something bigger," he said hesitantly. "A proper hospital, perhaps. One that serves everyone, miners, settlers, native people, where both our methods of healing are taught side by side." Anna's eyes widened. "That would take resources we don't have." "Maybe not." Nathaniel opened a drawer and withdrew an official-looking document. "This came from the governor's office this morning. The state is offering land grants for medical facilities in underserved areas." Anna took the paper, scanning it quickly. "This is significant." "The dream Sarah and I once had," Nathaniel said quietly. "But now with something more, your knowledge, your father's legacy." He turned to face her fully now, taking both her hands in his. "There's something else I've been meaning to ask you, Anna. Something I've wanted to say since that day in the ravine." Anna's expression softened, recognizing the shift in his tone. "When I found you in the snow that night, I was a man hiding from life," he continued. "I thought I was saving you, but in truth, you saved me." His voice grew more certain with each word. "I don't want to build this future as just your partner in medicine. I want to build it as your husband, if you'll have me." Anna's breath caught. For a moment she was silent, her dark eyes searching his face. Then slowly a smile spread across her features, the unguarded, radiant smile that Nathaniel had only glimpsed on rare occasions during their journey. "Yes," she said simply, stepping into his embrace. "Yes." Through the clinic window, the distant Rockies were still capped with white snow, but they were no longer symbols of isolation and escape. They had become testament to the journey two wounded souls had undertaken together, a journey that had transformed not just their own lives, but countless others. As the afternoon sun cast golden light across the room, Nathaniel and Anna stood together, their shadows merging into one. A doctor who had found his purpose again, and a healer who had found justice for her father. The mountains that had once separated them from the world now stood as silent witnesses to a future built on healing, truth, and love that had bloomed against all odds in the harshest of winters. They had survived the mountains of snow. Now they would build a life on the mountains of their hearts.